This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Ayin. All the learning has been sponsored as an incredible schos refuah shlema for Chadvalea Bas Saradina Mir Tashem. Learning the entire Chabura should bring Chadvalea Bas Saradina an incredible Yeshua, bring her back home, and ultimately a complete refuah shlema bekarev. As well as learning should bring us Chashidach Yisrachaim Devar Tamitzivah Bas Baruch Shalom Levizava Ovik Ben Teli Shema Ben Chayav Lumiudes Bas Sima Malka. As well as learning should bring us Chashidach Yisrachaim and Veda Shmo Ben Tilam Tazim and Chlas and Chama Bas Yiva Sar Blum Bas Mendel Chaim Bas Yeshua and Malka Shavigu Shevchana Besoich Sha'ar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on Samoch Tes Amid Beis. We are 7 lines from the bottom, and we are middle of a bit of a lengthy discussion that Rava just proved to us that the din of Rav, in which we're going to say that one who is Baal Rusasai Bebeis Chamav, we know back with Bisman Chazal they did Erusin and Nisuin separately, so they did Erusin, and then the husband and wife, not husband and wife, we'll call them the engaged couple, but real Erusin, would slept together Bebeis Chamav in the father-in-law's house, and they give birth to a child. So Rav said that kid's a mamzer, Shmuel said the kid is a shtuki. Rava said the din of Rav is only when we had suspicions that this woman was mizanat with people in the world, the damya me'alma. But if there are no such suspicions, then it goes after the husband, and Rava just proved that din. So Amar le Abaya, comes like Abaya, and Abaya says, 1 second, Abaya argues, and Abaya says, no, I'll tell you, you wanted to bring a raya from our Mishnah, I'll tell you, Kolech the damya minei, aval gav, the lo damya me'alma. That when the Arus is suspected of being only together with the Arus, even though there are no suspicions that she was with the whole world, still the kid is a mamzer. Amar Rav Avlad mamzer. My timer says Abai, where do I get this from? Tamrinon, we say, even if we don't know, but the mere fact that we know she was together with the Arus, which of course is Aser, Afkar Nashama Alma, says Abai, for the fact that she slept with the Aris, which is Aser, must be this woman is a Zaina and she slept with other people. Stam. And the Mishnah was talking about a unique case. And the reason why in the Mishnah we needed to have unique suspicions is because the Kayin and the Israelis were together in one jail cell, and that's the reason why we assume that the Kayin is the father. But in such a scenario, when that is not the case, then we assume that the kid is a mamzer, because we assume that this woman was mezaneh with other people. Igid says the Gemara, another way of learning is machlaikas Rav and Abayo with regard to one who is with together is Aros Bebeis Chamav, if the child is a mamzer in all scenarios or not. In a case when the Aros says it was from me, this woman who's engaged gives birth to a child, and the Aros says, I admit I was with her Beiser, then everyone agrees, we assume he is the father. And what is the case in which Rav and Shmuel argued? Rav said the kid's a mamzer, Shmuel said the kid is a shtukis. In what type of case? Arusa she'ibra. We have an aros, we have a woman who is engaged and she becomes pregnant, and the father, the aros, doesn't say anything. Rav Amar Avlad mamzer, Shmuel Avram Avlad shuki. That's the Gemara. And on this machloikas Amar Rava, the case is, says Rava, now it flips around. So over here we don't know anything about the Aros. So says Rava, when does Rav say the Vlad is a mamzer? Is when, says Rava, we don't have any suspicions with the Aros, and rather we only have suspicions to the world at large, and that's why Rav says the kid's a mamzer. As we turn over to today's daf, Sa'ayinam and Aleph, Aval Damya Minei, but if we have suspicions only from the husband, the Aros, Aval Gav the Damya Me'alma, then even if we also have suspicions to the world at large, no, we assume it's the husband. And Amar Rava, where do I get that from? And Aminullah again from our Mishnah, what is the case in our Mishnah? in which we say that when a kohen is together with the Yisrael, a Bas Yisrael illegally, where do we say that she is allowed to eat truma, and we assume that this kid belonged to the kohen? If we have suspicions only from this kohen and no one else, do you have to tell me? Of course, it's a very simple case. We have a kohen and a Yisraelis that have a child, so of course the Yisraelis is allowed to eat truma based over that kid, because that kid is a kohen. So what's the chiddush? You know what the chiddush of the Mishnah is? That there are suspicions that this woman was with the kohen, and also she was mizana to the world. And yet, what does the Mishnah say? We assume the kid is from the kohen and the woman can eat truma. If in that case where it's all be'isr, yet we assume it came after the kohen. In our case, and again, Atir here doesn't mean it was really mutter. It means that their aros means they're engaged in some level of Atir. Like Kol Shekin is not certainly the case. Therefore says Rava, that's where the din of Rava applies. And Abai says, no, any time, says Abai, that we have suspicions that she was with someone from the Welt, from the world, even though we know she was also with the husband, the aros, in the Mishnah we have no suspicions at all, and therefore says Abaya, the case of Rav, the case that the Rav said the Vlad is a mamzer, is going to be any time we have suspicions that she was with anyone from the world. Continues the Gemara, about 15 lines down, Ayin Amar Aleph, the two dots. Ha'eved paisal misham biyah. We said in the Mishnah that an eved makes the kohenes paisal from eating truma when the eved is together with its kohenes. If this is a bas kohen, this woman whose parents are kohen and she sleeps with an eved, this woman no longer is allowed to eat truma. Says the Gemara, my time. What is the reason of the din in the Mishnah? The pasuk says with regard to a shivcha that the woman and her children go to the master. That's where we see that the shivcha's child has a din of an eved and does not trace the lineage back to being a Yehudi, even though the grandmother was Jewish, because it came from a shivcha. The pasuk says that the servant's children have a din of a servant. Mamzer paisel u'meichel. And the Mishnah continued and said, if we have a grandson who's a mamzer, then what's the din? It makes the grandmother not to be allowed to eat a truma. We said that this is going to be the case that the grandmother is going to complain about the grandchild becoming a kohen gadol. Tan Rabbanan. Excuse me, not a kohen gadol, not a kohen gadol. If the grandson is a mamzer, then the grandmother, who's a bas kohen, is no longer allowed to eat truma. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. Where do we learn this out from? V'zera ein la. That with regard, says the pasuk that she has no children. This is a bas kohen who is either almana or a grusha, her husband died or divorced her. Then v'zera ein la. What happens, as we learned a few days ago, Shaval Beis Aviyah, she goes back home. She has no children. She's allowed to go back home and eat from the truma of her father's household. So from the fact that it says V'zera ein la ein li ela zar'ah, from this pasuk we only know if she has her own children. Zera zara minayin. How do we know that we even have to consider the grandchildren? That if she has a grandchild, she also cannot go back home to her father's house and eat the truma. Ta'amoloymer v'zera ein la mikol makom, in any scenario. And now the Gemara says further, ein li el zera kosher. That only tells me if she has a zera, a child who is kosher. Zera basal minayin. How do we know if she has a child, a grandchild even, that's basal, still it will disallow her from going back to her parents' house and eating truma? Tamaleimar v'zera ein la ayin Allah, look into her and ensure that she doesn't have any children and offsprings, even one who's going to be basal. Says the Gemara, 1 second, the ayin la from the extra yud, we're using we're learning two drashas from the same word. Zerazara lo yitzrich kra. We don't need a pasuk for grandchildren. Bebnei banim arei kibanim. Grandchildren have a din, of a status of children. Yitzrich kra lezera apostle. We need the pasuk to teach us. Zera apostle. Ayin lo, look into her, make sure there are no children. Says the Gemara. We said in the Mishnah that when we have a regular Yehudi, a regular Jewish woman, that's together with a Shivcha, an Eved, what's the din? The din is that child is a Mamzer. Asks the Gemara, Amrli Rish Lakish Rav Yechon, 10 lines at the end of the parak. This forbidden union is a regular Yisrael with an Eved, is a din, Yisraelis with an Eved, is a din of an Isser Lav. So we're going with Rabbi Akiva that's saying that the child born from an Isser Lav, a biblical Isser, when the Torah says Eloisa, say, has the status of a Mamzer. Says Gemara, no. Afilu Timur Rabbanan ba'akom ve'even moidid. The Rabbanan admit by when one is together with an Evan or an Akom that the child is a Mamzer. How do I know? The Chazar Avdimi Amar Avidu Bar Avdimi Mishum Rabbeinu Akom ve'even. Haba Bas Yisrael Havalad Mamzer, a unique chiddush of an Akom and Evan, that even though the Rabbanan normally hold that one who has a child from an Isser Lav does not create a Mamzer by an Akom and Eved, the rules change. And we conclude the parak with the last case of the Mishnah, in which the Mishnah said, that the woman's grandson just became a Kohen Gadol. What greater nachas? But the grandmother's not so happy because no longer she's allowed to eat truma. Tana Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Areini kaparas ben biti kuza. Says the Braisa, you know what the grandmother might say? May the kabara of my daughter's son, the lowly vessel, that mamzer, shemachelni b'chuma, for he allows me to eat truma. Vein kabaras ben biti, but I don't want to be a kabara for my daughter's son, who's kada, who's a great vessel, he's a kohen gadol, shepaslani minat truma. So we see that even though the grandson on one hand is a kohen gadol, she prefers the grandson the mamzer because then she's allowed to eat truma. Hajan aloch almana. We should do an incredible chazara of this 7th parak of Yevamos. And Amir Hashem, we're well past, not well past, but we're past the halfway mark of this Masechta. B'siyata dishmaya, we should continue with the same fire and vigor, ultimately to conclude Yevamos and of course all of Shas. And here we go straight away into the 8th parak, the parak of Ha'arel, which really is a very large continuation of the previous parak in which we just discussed the ability to eat truma. Says our Mishnah, going into the Kohanim themselves, if we have an Arel, what's an Arel? An Arel is a child that does not have a bris milah, v'chol ha'tameim, any kohen who is tamei, lo yoichel b'tshuma. So again, the previous parak we discussed when the relations forbid the wife from eating truma. Now we zone in on the kohen. The kohen is an arel or tamei, cannot eat truma. Nesheim v'avdeim, yoichli b'tshuma. If one, and we actually pointed this out a few days ago, this unique din, that when the husband becomes tamei, he can't eat truma, but it's only we said, it's the peh that's holding it back, the heavy mouth. Meaning it's not an Isser be'etzem. He just told me right now, and the wife is, and the Avadim are still at eat Truma. If we have a husband who cannot have children, there's something wrong with his Aver, and the Gemara is actually going to get a big graphic explaining exactly what the issue is. The testicles are squished or cut off, we'll see in a moment. Then, both he and the Avadim are yes allowed to eat Truma. Unishayim though, lo yachlu. Let's say they did not know, they were not together, they did not sleep with each other after the husband became a psuadaka. Then the woman, the wife is allowed to continue eating chuma. Here it is. What is a psuadaka? The beitzim, his testicles, are wounded. Even one of them. What is a krus shivcha? The gid, the member itself is severed, is cut off. Left over on the top a little bit. kosher, then he's going to be kosher. We'll see more about this in the Gemara. So let's begin the Gemara. Now we're getting involved in the husbands, the kohanim, when they themselves could yes or no eat truma. Begins the Gemara. Tanya, we learned in our brayso. Amar Rav Elazar Menayin la'arol she'ino yichel b'truma nemar toisha v'sacher b'pesach nemar toisha v'sacher b'truma. Says the Gemara, good old-fashioned Gzeira Shav. Says the words toisha and sachir. As we'll see exactly what that means, we don't know yet with regard to Pesach, and it says the same thing with regard to Truma. Now explains the Gemara and assumes the Gemara. When it says Taishav with regard to Karban Pesach, the halacha is one who is an Arul, one who does not have a bris milah. If you remember the very beginning of Mesechus Pesachim, we pointed out what is an Arul, and Arul is one who doesn't have a bris milah, and we pointed out in Machlekes Rishayim it can even be if he was not allowed to have a bris milah, meaning his brothers of Rachmana litzlan were nifter from the bris, therefore he paskin, he can't have a bris milah, but he still has a din of an Arul. We feel bad, but he still can't eat the Karban Pesach. So the words Taishav and Sachar link the din of Karban Pesach to the din of Truma, and just like Karban Pesach and Arul cannot eat, so too by Truma and Arul cannot eat. Step number one of our Gemara. Rav Akiva Omer, he argues, Einai tzarech, hareyu Omer, ish the rabbi's Arul. Says the Rav Akiva, no, we don't need the Gzeira Shava. It says, ish, kisia, metzayra, arzav, etc. Then he eats the Truma. Le rabbi's Arul, that he's allowed to, that he's included in the Isser of eating Truma. So we have two different ways of learning why an Arul cannot eat Truma. Either it's Gzeir Shava of Taishav V'Sachir, or it's Ish, says Rav Akiva. Amar, explains the Gemara, says Amar, quoting a Brayser of Lazar Aimer, Nemar Taishav Zachar B'Pesach, Taishav Zachar B'Truma, Taishav Zachar B'Pesach, Arul Aser B'Av, Taishav Zachar B'Truma, Arul Aser B'Ai. That is the Brayser we just quoted. Asks the Gemara, what is the basic idea of all Gzeira Shavas? We equate these two words with these two words, but it only works if the words are extra. So ask the Gemara, Mufna, are these words Taishav and Sachir extra that allow us to equate it to allow us to equate it to dinam of Truma? Tilam Mufna, because if they were not extra, then says the Gemara, because if the words are not extra, we can say that Pesach is different. Only by Karban Pesach, perhaps, an Arul cannot eat. Why? Because there's specific dinim by Karban Pesach. There's a Chiyah Pigel, Nicer, and Tameh, whereas that's not true by Truma. So ask the Gemara, are the words Taisha v'Sachir extra? Answers the Gemara, La'ai afnuye amufna. Indeed, they are extra. Says the Gemara, which ones? Hey, Mufna. Did Truma. If the words Taishav and Sachar written by Truma are extra, it's not Truma, it's a Srichi de Tanya. Taishav Zekonikini Oilam Sachar Zekonikini Shanim. The word Taishav is someone, and we call him in years, so he had his ears pierced. He's kind of forever. A Sachar is one who's kind of for years. The Yoimar Tashav. One second. The Yoimar Toshuv v'al yoymar sachir. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Why did the Torah have to list a kinyan oilam and a kinyan shanim? Oymar Toshuv should have only said the din by a Toshuv and not the din by a sachir. V'ani oymer. If someone who is a kinyan oilam, he's a yirtz, he has his ear pierced, he stays by his master forever and ever, and even he cannot eat truma. Kani kinyan shanim like kol shekain. Says the Gemara, wait, Ilu Keni Yisem, no, would have said Tashav Zekon Shanim. We don't know what a Taishav Tzachir is. That's the assumption we made. So I would have thought that a Taishav is only a Kinyan Shanim, a years. Avakani Kinyan Oilam Eichel. But Sachir V'liman al Taishav. So we had to write both of them to teach what the words themselves mean. That's the chiddush, that even though you're kind of forever, you cannot eat. So says the Gemara, the two words Station and Sachir are necessary and are not extra with regard to Truma. So says the Gemara, okay, let's switch. Let's go to Karban Pesach. The words by Pesach are extra. 2 lines to the bottom. Hi, Toshav V'Sachar, the Kaz Rachman B'Pesach, my niu. Inema Toshav V'Sachar mamish. If you're going to tell me that what is referred to, that Toshav V'Sachar, a near someone who's in heaven forever, and one who is and have been for years. That's what it's referring to. Misham dahavle toisha v'sacher iftalei mi Pesach. Says the Gemara, what's the hava amina? Just because they're avadim, they should be potter for the Karban Pesach. But we learned by Truma that neither of them eats Truma. So what would be the reason? Alma, so what do we see as we turn over Talmud Beis? So the fact that they cannot eat Truma, we see that the master does not coin to them. And if his master is not coin to them, that means that the regular Yidin, if the regular Jews, of course, they could have the Karban Pesach. Rabbi, so to over here, the master is not kind to them. They're not called a kinyan kasboy, and rather, what is the Eved who's a regular Yid? If he's a regular Yid, of course he can bring a Karban Pesach. So therefore, the words Taishav and Sacher are not necessary. Ella lafnuye. Rather, they are free. A bit of soup. They're extra, they're extra, and therefore we use them as the Gzeira Shava. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Bakati mufna mitzad echadu. This is only mufta from one side. Every time we have Gzeira Shava, we have two different concepts. Here we have Pesach, we have Truma. So we prove that by Karban Pesach, they're extra, but by Truma they're not extra. And any time the words are extra only on one side of the coin. But according to Rav Elazar, what's the halacha? We do learn one from the other, but meishivim. We're allowed to ask questions and say, are they actually equal, the two of them? And if that's true, we can go back and we can ask that Karban Pesach is more chamer because it's Truma, pigul, etc. Answers the Gemara, kiman de legufei loit sarich. Says the Gemara, no. Since by Karban Pesach, neither words, neither Taishav and Sacher are necessary. Shadichad Allah made, v'shadichad Hamalah made. Take one word Taishav, one word Sacher, one's going to refer to Pesach, one's refer to Truma. That itself will make it as if it's mufta from both sides. Therefore, we'll be able to learn one from the other. Therefore, we have a wonderful and beautiful Gzeira Shava, Taishav and Sacher, Pesach and Truma, equating the one to another. Ask the Gemara, if what you're saying is correct, if you're saying that we have a full linkage between Pesach and Truma, so all the dinim should apply. So just like by Karban Pesach, one is an oinin, a relative Rachman, l'slav is nifter before he's buried, is also to the Karban Pesach, so too by Truma, the same din should be, and we know that's not true. Amar Yisrael Chanin, Amar Kra, Zar Zar is a martilach. It's a din specifically in Zar and not Aninos, and Einin will still be allowed to eat Truma. Ask the Gemara, aim of Loyarilus, how do you know? It said Zar b'chol Zar. So you are telling me it comes to exclude Aninos. Maybe it comes to exclude Arilus. I says, Gemara, wait, Haksiv Taishav is Zacher. We're equating it. So the obvious Kasha Marois. How do you know? We have one pasuk that comes to exclude, one Josh that comes to include. We have a Gzeira Shava, Pesach, and Truma. We have a Chol Zar coming to exclude. How do you know which does which? Explains the Gemara, Mistabra, Arilus, Havle the Rabuye. It makes sense, says the Gemara, that Arilus is included in the Isser that you cannot eat Truma and the Karban Pesach. How do I know? Shkein Maisim Krusim Medavar Avad. As the Gemara explains, what is this acronym? They are, number one, an Aril is Mechusar Maisa, he's lacking in action. Umaisa Begufa, it's an action in his body, the Bris Milah. Vainish Kares, and it's an Isser Kares. Vyeshlos Nei Adiber, and it came before Matan Taira. Umila Zacharim. Zacharav Avodim Akaves, and the Mila of the Zacharim and the Avodim prevents him from being the Karban Pesach. So because all these things are so chamer, it makes sense to include an Arul is also not allowed to eat the Karban Pesach and not allowed to eat Truma. Says the Gemara, wait, I don't know how, I'll tell you the exact opposite, I'll throw right back at you. Aninos Havle Rabuye, why? Shkein Yashta B'chol Shah. Aninos applies to every single moment. Applies to men and women. And you can't fix yourself. So how do you know that's very chamer? Is also very chamer. Says the Gemara, no, my daddy's bigger than yours. Hanach Lefishin. These are more. There's more by Arilus than by Aninos, and therefore the Gzeira Shava is going to come to say that an Arul is Asar and not come to exclude an Einin. Teretz number one, why an Arul is not allowed to eat from the Karban Pesach and Truma, whereas an Einin is yes. Teretz number two, Rava Amar. It says, Rava, even without all the Chumros, you still would not be able to say that the Gzeira Shava comes to include an Einin. Shavkin and Arelos. because it makes more sense that we should let go, we should leave Shavak, leave Arelos, which is written by Karban Pesach, V'alfinan Aninos mi Pesach, and learn out Aninos from the Gzeir Shavak Karban Pesach. The Pesach Gufei mi Meiser Gamrina Ksona Pesach from Meiser Sheni, as we're going to see in a few daf. Therefore says Rava, it's more mistaver to go that way. Says the Gemara, okay, beautiful. But let's go back to our original Gzeir Shava. We have a Gzeir Shava equating Truma and Pesach, Toisha v'Sacher, Gzeir Shava. Ask the Gemara, wait, Ima Pesach Mila Zachar V'Avodim Ma'Keves, by the Karban Pesach. Both the father, the master, and the Avodim all need to have a Karban, all need to have a Bris Milah, or else they can't bring the Karban Pesach. So the same din should be by Truma. Says the Gemara, no, Amar Kra, it says in the Torah, Malta, Oisai az yechal boy. When he umalta oisai, singular, when he, the master, gets the bris milah, then he can eat truma. So we see clearly that truma is dependent upon the master and not the avodim. Milah zechar, milah zechar avodim ha'keves b'melech pesach. Milah zechar avodim ha'keves b'truma. That is the pasuk about truma. So what do we see? We see that it's only the master and not everyone else. But ask the Maryal. Now we're going to go through all the psukim by Truma and Pesach and find out all the singular words, what they're coming to exclude. So says the Gemara, if you're going to tell me that when it said Oisai by Karban Pesach, that extends the Gzeir Shava to Truma, so why don't we say Chol Aral lo yoichal boy? What does it say? Any oral cannot eat boy of it, which implies a boy only it, only the Pesach they cannot eat, but it can yes eat truma. Says the Gemara, no, we have the equation of Seisha v'Zachar, the Gzeir Shava. Omar Rois, again, Nachamal, how do you know which one they include and exclude? Mistavra Arilis du Gufei, Avle Rabu Yishkin Maisa Begufei, by Nishkaris. Adrab, Milschar, Avodim, Avle Rabu Yishkin, Eshe B'chol Shah, Hanach Lafish, and these are more. Viva Yisema will conclude with this, says the Gemara, Planach Lafish, and Nami Lomat Zamra, Mika Midi, Darilis du Gufei, Lo Makavis Bay, Arilis Dachrina Makavis Bay, says the Gemara Misvara, it cannot be. Says the Gemara Misvara, it can't be that his own arelos will not be ma'akev, but the oral of the Evid will yes be ma'akev, and therefore, says the Gemara, the Gzeir Shava comes to teach me about when he himself is an oral. I will pick up from 2 lines from the bottom the next year, in Mirza Hashem.